As you may know, I have somewhat of a skeptical view of this entire issue, and I am deeply concerned about the impacts on the economies and on the people of some of the changes that have been proposed. You may recall that sometime this winter, the European Commission reduced the cap on carbon emissions for EU countries, including the United Kingdom. And shortly thereafter, the Times of London ran a story that said that this would cost the British electric generating industry approximately 6 billion British pounds or 12 billion US dollars per year in order to buy the carbon offset credits necessary. And of course, all of this would end up being passed on to ratepayers and consumers of electricity. Furthermore, this story indicated that about 2/3 of the credits would be purchased outside the European Union. This is not a free lunch, and I am wondering what the British government is proposing to help residential ratepayers, particularly those on fixed incomes, who pay for this huge increase in the cost of electricity that they're going to need to light their homes and maybe even heat them.
I think everybody would share your concern if it was believed that in the round there would be a very damaging and only a damaging economic impact. And you picked up quite rightly on the increase in energy costs. The British government already does give extra help, particularly to the least well-off, the elderly, to the most vulnerable, and is looking all the time at how much more can be done and when it can be done. But I think I would stress that although for those who, like me, are believers in the science, it would be much more difficult if we believed that the net impact, the overall impact, would just be damaging. But we, many of us, believe that in fact, if you look at the position in the round, there are advantages as well as disadvantages. Let me give you a specific example. It's now very much predicted that ice in the Arctic will disappear faster than anyone had imagined. That can cause problems, but also, of course, it could create new trade passages. It could free up the availability of greater resources. And one of the challenges for the world community is to try to see that the availability, for example, of those trade routes, of those resources, doesn't feed conflict and instability by trying to encourage international cooperation. So yes, of course, there will be some damaging impacts, but there are huge opportunities too, not least for those who are the first movers in the industries, in the technological developments that will be required.
About 6 billion pounds of higher electricity costs in a country the size of the United Kingdom is a lot of money, and it's going to impact people who are the least likely to pay the most. If all of a sudden next month's electricity bill will be 2 or 3 times their current electricity bill. Is the government prepared to have a welfare program that is that vast in order to prevent people like this from frankly going broke or freezing during the winter?
Well, as I said, Mr. Sensenbrenner, the government does in fact have such a program, although I no longer speak for the government. But can I add that yes, there is an impact on the cost of the electricity companies. Those same companies have made equally, similarly large sums of money over the last few years in terms of extra profits. And there is much discussion about how they can work with the government to help those who are most vulnerable. So that is constantly kept under review, and that will always be the case in every country. I assure you, I am as conscious of the need to get re-elected as any politician. So yes, of course, we recognize these impacts, but there is another side to the coin, which is not always recognized.
Thank you.
Right. Gentlemen's time has expired. If you don't mind, the other members of the committee, we'll just recognize members for 2 minutes for questions from Mrs. Beckett, so that I know she has to leave, and we could still accommodate the other witnesses on this panel. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo.
Thank you, Mrs. Beckett, for joining us. I think that you not only honor us, but you grace this very important hearing. And we all want to salute you for the incredible role that you've played and the contributions that you've made. And I just couldn't mean that more. And I'm so delighted that you are with us today. As a former secretary and now as chair of the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee, you've been the principal user of national intelligence as well as being responsible for its oversight. Today, as you know, we are examining the marriage, the bringing together of national security and the whole issue of climate change. Can you tell us what sort of information or judgments related to climate change do policymakers need from their intelligence services? I'm sure you've already heard and picked up on the diminishment of even bringing the two together, that we have so many other things to do in the world, and this tinkering around with whether temperatures go up or down, and perhaps some inexact parts of the science. We need to leapfrog over this stuff and really get to important things. Can you comment on that and kind of fill in the blank as to what you think, what sort of information or judgments we need to bring about, and the cooperation of the international community's intelligence